All right, we are at 64b3, all the way at the bottom. So Samach Dalet Amud Beis, all the way to the last line. Okay, so 64b3. We are going to continue talking about intoxication. Amar Rav Sheshes Mishum Rav Elazar ben Azariah. Rav Sheshes says the name of Rav Elazar ben Azariah. Yachal ani liftar eskola ulam kula min adin. We're at Samach Hey Amud Aleph. I could present an argument which would cause all the Jewish people to be absolved from any judgment against them for any of their sins. Miyom shechar Beis Hamikdash v'achshav, from the time of the Beis Hamikdash's destruction until now. Shenemar, as it says. Shenemar, as it says, okay, Lachein shimi nazos ania ushchuras velo minayin. Okay, so the pasuk in Yeshaya says, "Listen to me, you poor ones, and the ones who are drunk, but you're drunk not from wine." In other words, the same impact of Yeshaya over here is referring to the Jewish people as intoxicated. Why are they intoxicated? They didn't drink wine, so why are you intoxicated? You're intoxicated because the Jewish people have been beat over the head due to the persecution of being in exile, being in Galus, of all the travails, of all the difficulties that we've experienced. Not just in, throughout all the history, and it causes us to be in a state of similar to intoxication, in as much as when a person's intoxicated, they can't concentrate, they can't focus, they can't do what they need to do. So too, a person who is going through such difficult times, they also can't concentrate, can't do what's right, and therefore, he says, there's an argument to be made that Jewish people should be absolved of all their sins because of the terrible impact of Galus. However, the Gemara asks on this, Meisvei, they challenge this, Shikor mekcho mekach umimkar memkar. Let's say a person sells something while they're drunk, okay? You have these, these interesting cases of people buying things on Amazon. What do they call it? There's like a term for it, whatever, like drunk buying. I don't know, whatever it is, but something like that. Whatever, the point is that a person goes ahead and they do something while they're drunk. Nonetheless, halachically, the sale is a good sale. Too bad, okay? Similarly, if a person commits a sin for which there is a death sentence, mimisnoso, they would still put the person to death. Malkanoso, if they commit something which the liability is for lashes, they would get lashes. Klelo shel davar, the rule is, the person is completely seen as lucid, as sane for everything. The person is only exempt from tefillah. So what was Rav Elazar ben Azariah saying when he said that a person is exempt from, I could go in front of God and say, hey, the Jewish people should never be punished for anything because of exile, because they're like a drunk person. Well, guess what? A drunk person is not exempt from everything. All they're exempt from is tefillah. They would be liable for everything. So the Gemara says, Gemara says, okay, one or possibly two answers. Ma yacholoni liftar de ka'amar. Nami midin tefillah. He didn't mean they'd be absolved from everything. What he means is to be absolved from the judgment of the lack of concentration during davening. Okay, so much less expansive statements. Now we're reinterpreting the statement to mean that that's what he meant. He didn't mean that he'd be able to say everyone be exempt from everything. Rather, he meant in a much more limited sense that he'd say that the fact that we don't concentrate very well on tefillah, the fact that we struggle with really focusing on tefillah, we'd say, okay, we're in a situation of galus, we're in a situation where things are so challenging in life, and therefore we'd be exempt from our lack of concentration during tefillah. I think it's the Chidah who adds, he says, the truth is, if you look at Rav Elazar ben Azariah's statements, he said, I can make them completely exempt from all judgments, right? So, it's a bit of a, we now move from to this. It doesn't sound like that's what he was saying. So the Chidah says beautifully, he says, no. He says, if we'd be able to daven properly, then all of our, one of the things we're going to daven, if you said brachos, you're going to say brachos, one of the things we daven for, and a big part of our tefillah is, Hashem, help me with my Yetzer Hara. Help me wage my spiritual battles. We ask Hashem for assistance in that. And if we're unable to daven properly, then all of the ramifications of our tefillah are impacted as well. So it's not just, yes, I'm unable to daven, but the ramifications of being unable to daven is that, therefore, I'm not able to ask Hashem for assistance in the spiritual struggles that I go through every day, and therefore I am indeed exempt to some degree from everything. It's true. If a person goes ahead and commits a crime while they are drunk, or they buy something while they're drunk, it still works. But the point is that Rav Elazar ben Azariah was accurate in saying, and we interpret him in its fullest sense when he says that Hashem will, they did argue that we should be exempt to some degree from everything, because once we can't daven properly, that does have ramifications for everything else as well.
Exempt doesn't mean that you're absolved from it. It just means that you can't do it, right? You still have the chiyuv to daven.
No, you're no. In other words, if a person drank, right, then they are, it's like they're right there. There's a big discussion about different hutra or put. You're exempt, meaning you are truly exempt. You're anus at that point. You can't
so doesn't want to daven, just stay drunk all the time.
Yeah, it might not be a good idea. This is Moshe Feinstein has an interesting tshuva about marijuana, and he says like the reason you shouldn't do it is because like how could you possibly do you're exempt from mitzvah. So on the one hand, meaning the act of drinking itself, the act of being in a position where you are going to be exempt may be a poor decision and maybe liable for that. But once you did that, you are then truly exempt from tefillah. Meaning it's like an anus. You're at that point you're anus.
You're changing your mindset. You're no longer be able to get.
Yeah. So you're honest. Like if a person is honest, then they're truly exempt from tefillah. Now again, don't put yourself in that.
Right. It's weird that I've never seen, or you don't really get that often, where you deliberately put yourself into a situation and now you're exempt.
Correct. But again, you're held accountable. You made the wrong choice there.
Yeah.
There's some level of avera, whatever it is, but the chiyuv of tefillah doesn't apply. There's no chiyuv, meaning no one's going to say you now have a chiyuv tefillah that you don't have a chiyuv tefillah at this point. On the contrary, we're going to see some very strong language in the opposite direction. We'll get there in a second. Fine, the bottom line is, Rabbi ben Azariah is basically stating that a person, however, whether we use the chidar or not, basically saying that at the very least for the concentration in tefillah, we can understand why that doesn't take place because of galus. Galus gets in the way of that. We live in a situation where it's very difficult to really focus. Amrav Chanina says, Loshanu el shalo higia l'shichruso shalot. The Bryce that says that a person is responsible for their actions is only if a person not reached the level of Lot's intoxication. We know Lot was extremely intoxicated. Okay, a person exempt from all obligations. There are those, I'm not sure if there's like pshat or more drush, but those who want to say that that's actually an answer to the question. The answer is that this is certainly not pshat. But what it's saying is that, we could actually justify Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's original statement by saying that we, in the state of Galus, we are on that level of Shechruso Shalot. Now, we're not. But the point is that someone to say that's what he's trying to convey. He's trying to convey that when a person is really going through a difficult time, that is equivalent to the person being so intoxicated, and therefore we are indeed exempt to some degree for all of our averos. The bottom line is, and the truth is, if you look at some of the heartfelt tefillos, whether it's slichos, and I believe it's during slichos, this Gemara is actually incorporated into tefillos where we basically turn to Hashem and we say that, we're going through we're in Galus, and it's so hard. It's so hard to serve you. Like if you were in a state where things were peaceful and we weren't constantly stressed over all the different anti-Semitism and all the challenges of not having a base of English, then we'd be in a good place. But we are shikr. We are to some degree we're intoxicated because of the difficulties of Galus. Okay. Again, that doesn't mean therefore it's a carte blanche. Do whatever you want. It's fine. Okay, says the Gemara. We're going to go further about the effects of intoxication on davening. Amar b'chanina, kol ha-mefik magin. Anyone who bypasses, the word mefik over here, as you're going to see, means bypasses davening. B'shas gaiva, at the time of, normally gaiva means haughtiness, but in this context means in time of intoxication. Sogrin v'chos mitzaras bado. Hashem contains and seals the troubles away from the person. In other words, it's a good thing. And this kind of touched upon what Ross is saying. Like, in other words, not just that you are, it's like, if a person's shikr, it's not like sometimes a person will be like, okay, well, I want to daven. If a person's able to say no, but I recognize it's usher for me to daven right now. Like, it's disrespectful to Hashem. It's not like, oh, I'm exempt. It's disrespectful to Hashem at this moment, right? So stopping yourself at that point, it's actually like a greater, right? The Gemara over here is saying you get schar, you get reward for doing so. That's what the Gemara says.
If a person is exempt from davening, does he have to say Shemona Esrei twice the next time he davens?
Yeah, it's a case of anus, right? It's a case of anus, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So ask the Gemara, "My mashma dahai afik lishna davurehu." What is this term? Okay, we read the pasuk. So the pasuk says again that gaiva afike. Oh no, sorry, I didn't read the pasuk. Shemar gaiva pasuk in Eov. Shemar gaiva afike maginim sagar chosam tsar. So the way that Rav Chanina is interpreting the pasuk is the intoxicated one who afike maginim. The word magin over here from Magin Avram, from the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, and afike means bypasses davening. Sagar chosam tsar, trouble is contained and sealed for him, meaning trouble is held back from him. Ask the Gemara, my mashma dahai afike afik lashon davurehu. Where do you see this idea that the word afik means bypassing? The siv achai bagdu kamo nachal ka'afik nechalam yavoro. My brothers have betrayed me like a stream, like the movement of streams they have passed by. Okay, so you see the word like afikim is like betrayed me, which also means like something which like passes by you, and that's where the source of the word afike, meaning bypassing, a person who bypasses davening. Rav Yochanan is going to say a very similar drasha, or Rav Yochanan Amar, kol she'enu mafik itmar. The pasuk doesn't mean that anyone who bypasses tefillah, but rather means anyone who doesn't express tefillah. And the Gemara says, "My mashmid hay mafik lishna de galuyehu." Where do you see that mafik means expressing? Dechsiv vayera'u afike mayim vayigalu mostos tevel. The channels of water became visible. Again, it's that word expressing. So a person who doesn't express tefillah, fine. So the Gemara says, "Michli kray mashmid ve'lamar ve'lamar." Basically, they're more or less saying the same thing. My benayu. They're both saying, "Don't daven when you're intoxicated." It's a good thing. What's the difference? So you can benayu Rav Sheshis. The difference between them is Rav Sheshis. What does that mean? Rav Sheshis master shinte l'shamai. Rav Sheshis, when he was drunk, when he drank too much, he would go ahead and he'd go to sleep and he'd tell his attendant to wake him up soon. Okay, so meaning that even when a person, so there's two possible things you could do when you are drunk and you go to sleep. One is you sleep, and when you wake up, by definition, like that means your body is like expelled, that you're in a better place. The fact that you woke up is like, I'm ready. Whereas Rav Shesha said, no, I'm able to go to sleep and tell the attendant to wake me up, meaning I don't have to wait until that later point. Right? In other words, right, those are the two possible things you do. So Mar Isli Rav Sheshes, Rav Yochanan, who says anyone who does not express holds like Rav Sheshes. Umar Leisli Rav Sheshes, and Rav Chanina, who said one who bypasses tefillah. The implication is like I really need to do something a little bit more when I'm intoxicated, right? So that's how they're interpreting the difference. Rav Sheshes saying, right? Rav Sheshes and Rav Yochanan are saying, as long as I went to sleep, as long as I didn't express myself in the moment, that's good. I could go to sleep, wake up a few minutes later. No problem. Rav Chanina says I have to bypass it. It's not just not expressing it. I have to completely get past the drunkenness, and only then can I daven. So that's the difference between them. Okay, fine, subtle difference. Let's go a little bit further in terms of the implication of intoxication and davening. Amrav Chia Barashi 65:82. Amrav Chia Barashi Amarav Kol she'ein daitem yushavas love al yispal. Anyone whose mind is not settled should not daven. Mishum shenemer batzar al yoreh. When in trouble, do not render halacha. Okay, and the Gemara understands that the two are the same. Just like you shouldn't paskin when you're in a state of distress, so too you shouldn't daven. Now the Mefarshim, the Shulchan Aruch brings down that's true in a time and place where people were able to have such incredible concentration. But nowadays, when unfortunately our concentration is wrecked anyways, and this was before the smartphone, our concentration is wrecked anyways. Therefore, we don't, even if we're in a bad place, we still daven, right? We still daven, but there would be an argument to be made, right? Keep in mind, this was halacha in the time of the Gemara. If they were in a situation, if they were not have clear-minded, they were not daven. In other words, what the understanding is that we'll go with the pshat with the Ramban, who says that tefillah is midrabanan, daily tefillah is midrabanan, and that's the simpler understanding. And if that's the case, Chazal did not institute tefillah when a person cannot concentrate. Okay, but then later posts come along and say, okay, but nowadays we don't have this. By the way, when the big controversy around Hasidim and probably the biggest flashpoint between Hasidim and Misnagdim when the Hasidic movement came out, there were a couple of things that the Hasidim were doing which were questionable. Some of them truly, the mainstream Hasidim, Hasidic rabbis would basically say these things are really problematic. But the one thing that the Hasidim did throughout, which really even the most mainstream Hasidic rabbis, was davening late, and basically would say I have to wait until I'm ready to. I'm clear-minded. I can't just wake up and just jump into davening. I have to learn. I have to do this. I have to do that. And they daven at some late time when they feel like they're ready. But it's all the way late. And there'd be the strong pushback. What in the world are you doing? You have Zman Tefillah. These Gemaras over here do provide some support to that notion. Now again, if the Chassid goes ahead, if you go to a real Chabad shul, they're not all rolling into shul. They're not supposed to be rolling into shul at 10:30. They're there at whatever o'clock, saying Tehillim, and then learning Tanya, and then singing, whatever it is. There's it's prep, right? And then at 10 o'clock, hopefully you're ready to daven. Most people go to Chabad Shul, I want to leave 10:30 minutes, I get to sleep in, and I get down at 10:30, and I come late anyways, right? That's not the point, right? Okay, fine. Rav Chanina, biyoma d'ratzach l'matzah, Rav Chanina, on a day that he would get angry, he wouldn't daven, right? We know anger throws us off. Amr Betzar al Yorek Siv, because again, based on this pasuk, when in trouble, don't render a legal decision, and the same thing is true for tefillah. Mar Ukva biyom deshusa lo have nafik levedina. Mar Ukva, the day that there was a south wind. The south wind was very strong winds. We've been having south winds here in Baltimore, right? Notice it's been the most windy past few months. Weird. Anyways, he didn't serve in courts. It would throw him off. You'd have to really be chilled. You have to sit there and judge someone. You have to really be in a state of calm, in a really state of where things are not no distress. Making a legal decision, you need the clarity of a day of the north wind, and that's the calm wind. Obviously, the next statement is a bit of an exaggeration, but he says, my mother asked me to pass her some kutzach. Kutzach was that milk dip, okay, which was very popular back then. Lo tonight. I wouldn't be able to learn. In other words, like anything would throw me off. His point that he's trying to make, now obviously, again, I'm sure he passed through the Kutach. The point that he's trying to make is like, to learn needs real concentration. You really need to be able to focus and concentrate, and anything can throw you off. You really need to set up a situation where a person has no distractions whatsoever. Amarava karatstan kina lotnai. If I was bitten by a louse, I would not learn. Now nowadays, maybe that resonates more nowadays. But keep in mind, back in the day, unfortunately, lice were like a common part of life, right? Lice was everywhere. They didn't have such hygiene like we do. Fine. Bottom line is, he wouldn't be able to concentrate. Mar Varej Ravina, we're going on a tangent. Mar Varej Ravina, Avdalai Ime, Shiva Mani Shiva Yome. His mother would make him 7 sets of clothing for one day, which was back in the day, different piece of clothing for each day was seen as abnormal. Why would she do this? Because by changing her clothing, there would be less of a chance of lice to generate, to be there, and this was done in order for him to be able to concentrate. Okay, Amr Yehuda, Lo Ibri Lelia El Lashinta. Now we talk about Torah learning. Night was created specifically for sleeping. Okay, sleep at night. The Rambam brings down Paskins that you have to sleep every night. He Paskins have to sleep 8 hours. Whole big discussion, a huge discussion among the poskim. Does he mean you have to sleep 8 hours? Does he mean a recommendation? Does he mean like maximum 8 hours? Fine. Bottom line is, it's important to sleep. It's important to sleep. We act like normal people when we sleep. Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Shimon Lakish says, "Lo Ibra Sihara El Legirsa." He says the moon's light. Why did Hashem create light at night? You gotta keep in mind, back in the day, at night the world would shut down. Everyone would be asleep at night. So why did Hashem create the moon? The moon was created so people could study. We need some light. So it was done so people could study. Amar Lahu Rav Zera Mechadan Shmaitach. They told Rav Zera, your teachings are very sharp. Amar Lahu Dimamaninu. He says, and here he says the opposite. They're from daytime study. In other words, he argued and said, no, daytime is the ideal time to study. Amar Le Baratid Rav Chisda Lobai Bar Meinam Porta. Don't you need? So the daughter asked her father, don't you need to sleep a little? Amar Le, he said to him, and this is the origin of the statement of I'll sleep in the grave. Hashta asa yamu dariche bektine v'neinam tuva. Soon there's going to be a long day coming along, and it's going to be too short for learning. I'll sleep then very much. Don't worry, I'll sleep in the grave. That's his answer. Amar Nachman bar Yitzchak, Anan Pola Diamamanan. Those who study Torah are daytime workers. In other words, he's arguing again that you should be studying at daytime. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Yazif Ufara. Rav Yaakov would borrow and pay his study hours. This is a beautiful thing that people would say, I'm dedicated. I'm supposed to be studying for X amount of hours a day. And so when a person misses some of the time they designated for studying, they would write it down. I had a friend. Tragically passed away at a very, very, very young age, and after he passed away from Montreal, his name was Toby Warncliffe. I just mentioned it. He passed away like he was like 20 or so, like suddenly, very, very shocking. But they found in his Gemara, he would keep track when he would battle, when he would like talk during learning. He would after do so he'd write down like I spoke for 2 minutes, and then he would make sure like after Seder to make up those hours. That's what he's saying over here. If you have a Seder, you use it to learn. You don't use it to talk. Like that's a designated time. Okay. Amar Lazar, Habat min aderech aisbal shlosh person who travels from daven for 3 days. Okay, Shnemar v'akvetzeim el hanar habal ava. Ezra says, I gather them to the river which comes to Ava v'nachne sham yam shlosha v'avina v'am. We rest there 3 days, and then I scrutinize the nation. In other words, is before I started thinking clearly, I need to rest for 3 days. Again, nowadays we say we're not going to really pass like that, but the point is that travel also makes it hard for a person to concentrate. Similar Shmuel, when he traveled, he went daven for 3 days. Shmuel lo matzli b'veisa de isbei shichra. Shmuel will not daven in a house that contained beer because the smell would throw him off. Or Papa lo matzli b'veisa de isbei harsana. Rapapa will not daven in a house that contained fried fish. Same idea. Okay, not just intoxication would throw him off. Okay, Amrav Chanina call misbata b'yeno. Anyone who gets appeased to overlook an injustice inflicted upon them by drinking wine. Yesh mudas kono. In other words, here we're talking about a positive thing. Person's bothered by someone, so what do? They could rage at the person, they could get angry at the person, they could, or they could drink, so they can make a l'chaim and calm themselves down. Doing so, that's that's a godly thing to do. Hashem smelled the pleasant aroma of Noach's karbanos, and that appeased him, and he didn't bring a flood, right? So basically, it's this idea that we're supposed to go ahead and do so. Amrav Chia call him Misyashev b'yeno. Anyone settled with a clear mind after drinking wine, yesh bo das shivim zakenim, that contains the attributes of 70 judges. Why? What in the world is the connection between being calm and 70 judges? Yainitum Meshivim Osios. The numerical value, the gematria of wine is 70. Besonitum Meshivim Osios. Numerical value of secrets, which is the idea of the 70 judges, is 70. Fine. Period. That's the idea is that it is associated with 70 judges. And then a very famous line, Nichnas Yain Yatsa Sod. The idea is that when wine goes in, Sod, which is also equivalent to 70, goes out. As we all know, people are less tight-lipped when they are drunk. Amrav Chanin Lenivra Yain El Nachma Velim. Wine was created to comfort the bereaved. It's there to, back in the day, you look at the Gemara in Ksubis, they would have a very elaborate process of drinking after they come back from the funeral. Something like what do they call it? The Irish do this, right? Awake. Thank you. So basically, they would do this. They eventually abolished it. It was getting out of hand, understandably. But what's it called? But basically, they would drink after. Wine is there to why does Hashem create wine? Because sometimes a person's so distressed. Again, if a person's doing this on a daily basis, horrendous. That's horrible. That's not functional. But the fact is that when a person has a loss, again, a one-time, not a thing that's a regular thing, it has value of having a person being able to calm themselves through a little bit of that, and to give reward to the wicked people. In other words, also, it's a great pleasure. It's a pleasure. People take advantage of it and just have pleasure in this world. You're not going to have pleasure in the next world. So it's also, again, it's this balancing act between the two things. Give wine to the wicked one, fine, and wine to the embittered soul, fine. Amarav Chanin Bar Papa. Any house which in wine is not poured like water, there is no bracha. Whereas the pasuk Hashem says, "I'll bless your bread and your water." And the Gemara homiletically says, "My lechem shenikach b'kesem meiser, af ma'im shenikach b'kesem meiser." Just like bread has to be significant, it's bought with meiser. So too water, which is purchased with meiser. Now meiser sheni funds cannot be used for water. So what is it referring to? My nihu yayin v'karle mayim. So wine is referred to in this pasuk as water. So inish b'chveso kamaim. If it's poured out in your house like water, ika bracha v'lo lo. If not. Back in the day, whenever they would pour wine, they would spill some wine out. Nowadays, we only do that for Havdalah. And there's sorry. Well, that's because you spilled. What's it called? But not a yes. Alachili. Sorry. Yes. But yes, the main minhag of pouring extra specifically for this is this idea of the bracha. It's a beautiful pshat I once saw. Not pshat, but it's a beautiful pshat, and that is that when people spill important things, right? If a child goes ahead and breaks something, or a spouse goes ahead and ruins something, what do you normally get? Angry at them, right? So we start the week off with the idea, and any house that doesn't have wine being poured like wine, meaning a house where if you spill some water, no one blinks. So I was like, okay, spill some water, go clean it up. So similarly, when a person spills something important, something chashuv, something that has value, and we're able to just treat it like water, be chilled, be calm, and say, okay, fine, you scratch the car, you did this and whatever, okay, no big deal, you treat it like water. That's a house of bracha. A house is able to have calm response to those types of things. That's a house that has bracha. That's the message when we pour the extra wine at the beginning of the week. We should be thinking about the fact that we want to make sure that we are calm and collected when we respond to the inevitable mistakes and mishaps that happen in the house. Have a great day.